Welcome to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Russo and Samantha Powell.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. I'm Denise Russo, and I am so excited to introduce you today to a new part of our group. The person that I'm introducing is someone that I have become very fond of as a leader in life and in business. Sam Powell, I'm so happy that you're here with us today. Thank you so much for joining not only What's on Your Bookshelf, but all of the great work that we're doing with School of Thoughts.
Thanks, Denise. I'm super excited to be here and to talk to you today about what's on our bookshelf. And I'm really excited to work with you always, and any chance that I get to connect with you is always one of my favorites.
Awesome. We've had a really great time together learning through books as leaders. In fact, the book that we had a chance to work together on a few years ago was Emotional Intelligence 2.0, right? By Bradbury, I believe.
Yep. Yeah, that was great. I learned so much from that book, and I don't know. I mean, I'm an avid reader, so anytime I can get my hands on a new book with a new little nugget of wisdom in it, I'm all for it.
Awesome. Well, what's the book that we're going to be talking about today?
Oh, I'm super excited. This is one you recommended to me called Coach Wooden by Pat Williams. And you recommended it because it's really about, life principles, but through the lens of somebody who's sports focused, which for me, my passion and what I really love and what I work on is leadership through a sports lens and using the stories and the wisdom that we learn from sports in leadership. And so when you recommended this book to me, I was all about it and here for it completely. So I loved it. I'm so glad you recommended it.
Oh, awesome. So tell us a little bit more. You grew up being an athlete, right?
I did. My dad is a coach. He has coached high school sports my entire life. So I grew up in a gym, on a field. I mean, most kids, when they leave school for the day, they're off to, childcare or, back home or something like that. I went straight from school to a basketball gym and watched high school players grow up and play and watch my dad coach. So I just have an innate passion for everything that's sports and, any kind of lessons that we can pull from coaches and athletes and from the games themselves. I love it. And I learned really early on in my leadership career in the corporate world that there was a huge overlap between business leadership and sports itself, right? It's one of the things we teach women, especially in leadership development, is part of the language of leadership, especially in the US, is sports. And we use a lot of metaphors and analogies and things like that. And so for me, that really called to who I am and how I grew up. And this was one of those books that I think really solidified a lot of that because it's got so many stories from athletes, because John Wooden is a famous basketball coach. So super exciting.
Awesome. So not only are you an athlete and a fan of leadership, but we both are moms and we both have little athletes that are on different kinds of fields. Your son plays baseball. My son and daughter play soccer and have been in Taekwondo. And so it's really exciting to be able to talk through these leadership lessons. I'm encouraged about today because we just passed Mother's Day, which is, of course, one of my most favorite holidays of the year. And we learn in this book a lot of lessons from the lens of John Wooden's father, Hugh Wooden. Mm-hmm. So as we get started today, Sam, how about we share a little bit with our listeners about what we're going to do over the next several episodes together?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So this book is great. It is the 7 principles that shape John Wooden's life. So what we're going to do is we're going to explore today, the setup of the whole book, because it's really, like you said, it's all about John's father. And we're coming out of Mother's Day, right? I feel gratitude for my parents. I feel gratitude for those who fill those types of roles in our life. And so it's a really great setup from there. But each week, what we'll do is go through one of the principles and really deep dive into the stories around that, stories that have impacted our lives, books and readings and things like that. So I'm really excited to dive really deep into what is actually a pretty short book. It's only 170 pages, but man, is it jam-packed full of hours worth of discussion we could have. And so we're going to break it down and break it apart. And I can't wait to dive into that with you.
That sounds awesome. I agree with you about being grateful for my parents as well as what you just said. And when I think back to my younger days, I can remember my mom, she wasn't an athlete, but she was at every single thing that my brother and I did, whether it was little league or ice skating or hockey or golf. My dad taught my brother and I how to golf at a very young age, and it's proved to be a very important skill to have in leadership and in life. It's fun for me now because I get to go golfing with my son. And so we're going to look into what are some of the things that Coach John Wooden's dad taught him at a very young age. These are the 7 principles that shaped his life and will change yours. Now, this book was written by Pat Williams. And Pat Williams is not only an author, but he's a leader in sports and in leadership and in life. Pat Williams is from Orlando, where close to where I live, and happens to be in the process of trying to get a Major League Baseball team situated in Orlando. So I cannot wait to see this news continue to unfold. In fact, Pat Williams is not really from the baseball world. He's from basketball, same as Coach Wooden. Pat Williams was a former NBA player and was the founder of the Orlando Magic. So it should be really exciting as we look through some of the leadership lessons in his lens of learning about the tips of success from Coach John Wooden. Coach John Wooden also happens to be a mentor of someone that has become a mentor to both you and myself, Sam, right? John Maxwell, different John, leadership guru, let's say the number one athlete of the leadership world, if you will, Dr. John C. Maxwell, who often references some of the quotes of John Wooden, who was one of his personal mentors in life. So the 7 principles that shaped John's life were actually given to John by his father, Hugh Wooden, and kept in his wallet since he was in the 8th grade. So we're going to not touch on each of those 7 principles in depth today. We're going to do that over the next several episodes. But why don't we just start by talking about what those 7 are to set the stage or lay the foundation. So these 7 things, his dad, John's dad, Hugh Wooden, wrote to him when he graduated from the 8th grade, and he put them on a card. And on that card, the 7 principles were: number 1, to be true to yourself; number 2, to help others; number 3, make each day your masterpiece; number 4, drink deeply from good books, and in John's case, especially the Bible; number 5, make friendship a fine art; number 6, build a shelter against a rainy day by the life that you live; and number 7, pray for guidance and counsel and give thanks for daily blessings. What were some of the notables for you, Sam, as you were looking through the intro of the book?
Oh gosh, yeah, it was so great. And I got to tell you, you recommended this book. I bought it right away because I thought, oh, this sounds great. I read a piece of the introduction. I read those 7 things and I was like, okay, like they sound good. I'm on board. I get it. But then I put the book down for probably, I don't know, like a week and a half, and didn't pick it back up. I don't know why. Something about that list was like, it's fine. But I didn't get it until I picked the book back up, and I really started to dive into it. And I got past page 3 of the intro and on to the rest of the introduction, and really called to the character of John and this insane, positive, unconditional reverence he had for his dad. Like it just, really was something different. And even one of the stories in the book is specifically that. It's I think it's the author's wife or somebody's wife says, I've never met anybody like John who had such an unconditional, positive feeling about their parent. And it really shaped who John is, and how he led his life and how he led his teams and really anybody who impacted from him. So this whole introduction, I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is just how important John's father was to his life and how he impacted every single day and every single moment in a lot of spaces about how he lived and how he led other people. It was amazing.
Absolutely. In fact, John Wooden, and for people that don't know really, they might think of him as an all-time winning coach, college coach of basketball. But what the people that are closest to John knew, and the people that learn about the leadership lessons from John Wooden, know of him as more than just a basketball coach. They know of him for his good character, his integrity, his strong work ethic, and teamwork. And as we're going to see as we explore the book together, that all of those things were instilled in John and his brothers through his dad. John was known as a man of character, wisdom, self-discipline, faith, integrity, honor, humility, and compassion. And so I was curious, Sam, you were mentioning to me as we were getting ready for this episode that you had seen a TED Talk that was talking about something like how people impact your lives. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, my absolute favorite TED Talk is probably about, I think it's, I don't know, it's less than 10 minutes long. It's super short, but it is about a guy who, what he's talking about is what he calls lollipop moments. But it's these little moments that impact somebody's life so greatly. And you have no idea when it's going to happen. You have no idea when you're going to give somebody a moment and it's going to be that thing that they remember for forever. And when I think about, I mean, John's dad gave him so many moments, right? Like, I mean, those are huge, huge things. But it immediately made me think about how we touch each other's lives and how we really never know what day is going to come and how we're living our life and just what we're doing for who we are and what we care about and the values that we hold. How one day that's going to be the thing that somebody remembers about you. And sometimes it's something you didn't even realize. A lot of times it's something you didn't even realize. And that's what my favorite TED Talk is really all about, is that there's these moments that you can have great impact. You can be somebody super important to somebody's life and you have no idea. And sometimes you do, right? Your children, you're probably impactful to their life. I mean, that's how that works. That's a default setting. But sometimes, you just don't know what that thing is going to be. I've been a leader for a long time, right, in the business world. And I always hope that I'm telling somebody something that's going to be important for them, right? Like, I'm like, man, I hope that somebody like takes away from this little speech I gave them. This is going to be something great. The funny thing is the only thing that's ever been quoted back to me of all the things that I've ever said is, and it's been by multiple people, is, that Excel is a calculator, right? Because what I've watched a lot of people do is working on a spreadsheet, doing whatever, and then they pull up their calculator app or they pick up their cell phone and they start to do the app. And I'm looking at them and I'm going, Excel, like the thing you're on right now is literally a calculator. And for me, that really calls to actually a deeper purpose I have in my life, right? I'm really about making things easier for people, right? Through organization, through taking, the big picture and making it easier. But the actual quote that gets quoted back to me all the time and what I've told people is that moment where they're struggling to like do multiple things. And I'm like, yeah, the thing you're on is the thing that can help you, right? Your Excel is a calculator. And so you just never know when like those little tiny moments are going to happen that you impact somebody's life. You're going to have people who think about me every single time they pull up Excel, which is crazy. I'm not an Excel person. Like, that's just not what it is. But it's funny that those little moments, and, there's a lot of those stories throughout this book, which I think is really really neat. But when we think about the impact on other people, you just never know what yours is going to be. But I think if you live by these 7 principles, that's really kind of what it gets down to. If you live by some kind of guiding principle in your life, some kind of guiding force, then you'll impact people in the way you really want to, even when it's in these little ridiculous Excel moments or lollipop moments, as the TED Talk talks about.
I love that. If you think about impact and the lessons we leave people with, it started to get me to think about there's a television show and a movie that also talk about impact, The Office and Bad Bosses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the impact could be something different. In fact, I have teenage kids, and I don't know about you, Sam, and if your son has ever played this, but have you ever seen this thing called Bean Boozled?
Oh my gosh. My son's 8 and he probably got one of those when he was 6. And I mean, for like 2 months straight, we had to watch what we were eating because we were going to get bean boozled about something ridiculous.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny because I think the lesson in it is that this is something made by Jelly Belly Jelly Bean Company, and it's a game. You can buy it at, I don't know, Walmart or Target or grocery store. But Bean Boozled takes the jelly beans that you may be familiar with based on the color, and it actually is going to taste much different. And you have to guess whether or not you're going to be bean boozled by the color of the jelly bean. Bean boozled meaning like you could get something green that would normally taste like a refreshing lime jelly bean, but it could also taste like barf or grass or something disgusting, right? And so I refuse to play that game with my kids because they are definitely secretly trying to bean boozle me. But isn't it funny to think about that who you are on the outside first shows up by what you're made up on the inside?
Mm, mm. I love that. I love that. Yeah, and that reminds me, you and I are both disciples of John Maxwell, and that reminds me of his 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. And I mean I think it's law 13, that's the law of the picture, and it's really all about that you have to show what you are. And it's sort of the opposite. And then he's got another law that's all about, your internal growth and things like that, right? A leader is somebody who is growing all the time. Who's moved? That's an excellent book. And any leader should probably read that one. But that reminds me a lot of just the fundamentals of what leadership is, right? It's inside out. You have to know who you are. And we get into this later on. I think it's chapter 1, or it's chapter 2, the first principle that, who you are on the inside is so important because it's the first thing that really sets the foundation. But what you look like on the outside, what you're showing to the world in your actions and in your deeds and in what you do is really what people follow. And I think that's, not only did John's dad pass on these principles to him, he lived them, right? And then John lived them. And there's a quote later on in the book that talks about, you don't have to. He never had to teach anybody these 7 principles. Anybody that was on his team, he didn't sit down and be like, all right, here's the 7 principles of how we're going to do things around here. No, he just lived them. And so all of a sudden you just knew about them. Did he hand them out to people later? Yep, definitely. But if you knew John, you knew the principles because you watched him lead that, because that's who he was on the inside. And, that's that law of the picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're showing, you're displaying what you really want who you are on the inside and what you want to be in the world.
Yeah, one of my most favorite John Maxwell quotes, it's actually Vincent's favorite quote. Vincent's my son. And this quote says that leaders know the way, show the way, and go the way. And that's definitely what Coach John Wooden did. In fact, on that card that we were talking about where Hugh Wooden wrote those 7 secrets to his son, there was something on the other side of the card. And John Wooden passed out thousands of these cards to people. So he knew it and he showed it and he went the way of these principles, but he was helping people from foundationally the beginnings of them becoming leaders through to whatever it was that they did in their life, either on or off the court. And so on the other side of the card, there was this poem that was written by somebody named Henry Van Dyke. And the poem was about 4 things a man or woman must learn to do if he'd make his life more true. And you just touched on all 4 of those things, Sam. They were about thinking, loving, acting, and trusting. And so the way that the poem went is that the 4 things a man must learn to do if he'd make his life more true is to think without confusion clearly, to love his fellow man sincerely, to act from honest motives purely, and to trust in God and heaven securely. So when you think about those things, what does that have anything to do with what he was teaching the boys on the basketball court?
And I think this is to me what's so fascinating about sports and leadership, right? Like I love sports, but I don't love sports the same way everybody else does, where you love the stats and things like that. That's interesting to me. I have a math background, but in the actual game and the players and things like that, what I love is these lessons that you pull out from it, because it's that fundamental question you just asked. What what is it about the poem that you just shared about these life lessons that you're carrying out? Like, what does that have to do with sports? And they, like, if you really study it and you really get down to it, it's everything, right?
Yeah.
It's everything about it, and vice versa, right? The lessons that you learn in sports carry back over to life and to leadership and things like that. And yeah, I think that's what that's what this message really transcends.
I agree with you. I think that when I think through what I've been reading in this book is that Coach Wooden, he used his platform of being a well-known coach on the court, but as a catalyst to be able to help others through the way that he lived. And he talked about in this intro to the book about how his dad was his hero. And yet, really, his dad didn't live by the definitions that society puts on
Mhm.
success. Hugh Wooden, the dad, his legacy lived on through his sons. And this is how John described his dad. He said that success is peace of mind, and that his father was three things: physically powerful, morally upright, and intellectually curious. He described his man as a gentleman and as a gentle man who loved his family deeply. So when I was thinking about this, those three things to me, Sam, are really about the holistic self, the 360 you. It's everything about your mind, your body, and your soul. So just like John said, the mind, his father was intellectually curious. His body, he was physically powerful. And his soul, he was morally upright. So when you think about leadership, how important is it that you be a holistically well-rounded person in your mind, body, and soul before you show up and serve others?
Oh gosh. I think that that's everything, right? If you want to serve somebody else, and in order to do that, right, that's where there's that saying of like, you can't fill from an empty cup. And we often mean that in the terms of energy, right? If I'm stressed out, if I'm doing whatever, I can't pour into somebody else when I've got nothing in my cup. But that is so true of every aspect of being a leader, right? If I'm not learning and growing, if I'm not living that life, if I'm not being the complete holistic best version of myself, how can I ever help you become that yourself, right? I haven't, and it goes back to that quote you said that's Vincent's favorite, right? If I don't go the way, if I don't grow the way, right, then I can't expect you to follow along with me, right? And the point of leadership is to help other people follow behind you, right? You're the person with the machete chopping through the woods, but if you haven't worked on your machete chopping skills, and you haven't sharpened your knife, and you haven't done all those things, if you're not working on you as a complete package, how do you expect anybody else? How do you expect to help anybody else become the best version of who they're going to be? And I love it reminds me of the title of chapter 1 of this book, which is part of the intro up to the principles. But he called his dad a common man, a leader's leader, right? Like what you're saying is exactly that. John's dad wasn't anybody that you would think, but he wasn't anybody that, like, yeah, by societal standards you'd be like, he's amazing, right? Look at all these accomplishments in his life. If anything, he had a million setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
But he knew to work on the self as a whole, right? And to teach that lesson to his children and to his sons that, you've got to focus on all of you. And that's something that John ended up living and breathing and doing. And I learned so much about him in this book that I didn't know. Like, I know who John Wooden is, right? I've read plenty of things by him, but it was so interesting to me that he just in who he was and what he picked up from this man that he just held this complete reverence for, which I just thought was incredible. And it wasn't from anybody who we would think of as a leader, right?
Right.
He was the leader's leader, right? He's the person behind the scenes. It reminds me of business, right? Like, a really good leader has a really good chief of staff. I always thought I wanted to be a chief of staff. Like, that always seemed like the thing for me. that was like, yeah, I want to be that person behind the scenes, like pulling the strings, helping the person like be the best version of themselves. And that's probably what leadership really is, helping somebody else be the best version of themselves and pouring into somebody else. But you're right. You've got to be the best version of you. You've got to live by those principles that you would like to see in other people. And that has got to be that complete 360 you, like you say.
I love what you're describing it as chief of staff, helping others be at their best, because it makes me think about Hugh Wooden. He was the chief of the family, and his job was to help his family be at their best. And it seems to me that Hugh Wooden was consistent and authentic. In fact, just this week, I saw a quote from Brene Brown, and on authenticity, she said, "Authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every day. It's about the choice to show up and be real, the choice to be honest, and the choice to let our true self be seen." Now, that quote also reminds me of the last episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. In that episode, we contrasted two very famous athletes, one from a football field, one from a basketball court. And in both cases, there was the question of consistency and authenticity. Now, you'll have to listen to the episode to hear part of this story. But Sam, tell us a little bit about the blog you just wrote based on the episode from last time.
In the last episode, you all were talking about Giannis's interview, which was everywhere, right? It was on every piece of social media I went on. It didn't matter if I was on TikTok or YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, like it was there. And I watched that interview a million times. But there was this part to me that really stood out. And it's what ties back into the intro of this book is Giannis has got a lot of great little nuggets of wisdom in that. And you guys all talked about a really neat aspect in last week's podcast. But what I looked at was there was a part where Giannis said it's the wrong question, right? The whole interview with him was sparked off by this question from a reporter. And it was if Giannis thought because they didn't make it to the finals for the NBA, if the season was a failure. And Giannis was like, went on this great, wonderful tirade about, right? That's not it. But it was the wrong question. And what I really focused on in this blog and what the idea that sparked to me was about success is contingent on, or failure is contingent on how you define success. And so success is really contingent on your mindset, which I know for you, Denise, is like one of your big things. It's all about mindset. It's all about how you think about something, because that drives all of your actions and everything you do. And in this introduction in this book, they take it a step further. And it's a quote from John. It says, "Success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction and knowing you made the effort to become the best of which you are capable." And I think about that with coaching, right? You and I are both coaches around goal setting. And this is why for Giannis, it was the wrong question the person asked, because that wasn't how Giannis defined success. And when you are really clear, right? We talk about in coaching, we talk about goal setting, when you're really clear on what success looks like. And this book gets into one of the principles is making each day your masterpiece. If you're really clear on what a masterpiece looks like, what success really defined as, then there's this huge sense of peace when you get there. I'll never forget one of my really good friends now, but bosses at the time, and definitely one of the mentors in my career, one of the people who made all the difference to me. She looked at me at one point and she said it to other people. She's like, "You're going to be my boss one day." And I was like, that doesn't make sense to me. You're like 10 years ahead in your career of me. Like, I look up to you. Like, you're one of the people I really, really look up to. And she said, "No, like, I know what level of leadership I want to be at." Right? Like, she was really clear on what her definition of success at that point in time was for her career and what level of leadership. And there was such a sense of peace for her of, I don't want to be the CEO, right? I don't want to go, like, that's just not where I'm headed. And right here is enough. And right here is where I want to be. This scope of leadership is where I want to sit and where I want to be. And I think about that all the time, because if you know what success looks like, if you've got that definition, then you're really clear on where you're headed and what you want to go and what actions you have to take. And when you get there, there's this huge sense of peace around it, which I just think is so amazing. And there's so much more happiness. And there's a whole science around happiness about, sitting in what is. And knowing that enough is enough.
I really appreciate how you were saying to define success for yourself. And it really harkens back to another John Maxwell quote, which is that once you have tasted significance, success never satisfies. When you think about the way that life defines success, or the world defines success, or the business world especially defines success, because you're right, in all ways that this world defines success in business, Hugh Wooden didn't have that, but he somehow rose above his circumstances, and he didn't complain about his circumstances. In fact, in the intro to the book, it talks about how one time, I mean, his life was just horrible. They had no electricity in their house. They had outhouses for bathrooms. They didn't even have basketball nets at their house. John Wooden's mom and dad used ingenuity to create things out of farm tools, if you will, to create basketball nets and even the balls. He didn't even have a ball. And so one time Hugh Wooden had gotten a tainted vaccine for the pigs that were on his farm because he was a farmer. And not only did all of the pigs die, but drought killed all of his crops. So literally he lost everything. But he wasn't bitter and he didn't complain. And here's what he taught his sons during those circumstances and hard times: that blaming, cursing, and hating does not help you. It actually hurts you. And so again, going back to the Bean Boozle example, who you are on the inside will eventually show up on what you look like on the outside. So he said to his sons, don't whine, don't complain, don't make excuses, just do the best you can. And there was a quote in the book, I think it was probably from Pat Williams, that he said, young people are keen observers of their parents' reactions during times of stress. And then John said, what you do is more important than what you say you'll do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Sam, like, how do you get peace of mind? We were talking about that earlier with the TED Talks that you saw and some other things, but how do you get peace of mind? And when do you know that the way to peace of mind is making that best effort you were just talking about?
This is where I think we have to get really clear on what our goal is, right? What is the definition of success, or the definition of achieving this goal really looks like? Because then what you've got is like a compass, like a true north on where you're headed, or what are your priorities and what are your values that you live by, right? Because then when you sit down at the end of the day and you reflect, or you sit down at the end of the week or the month or whatever you do, and you sit down and you look at the actions that you've taken, it's always about that, pointing that compass towards your true north, right? If my goal is to accomplish something specific, are my actions getting me there, right? Am I living a life that's moving in that direction? And is the character that I'm building in myself, is the development that I'm focused on in myself, all in serving that purpose that you're looking towards? And I think that, I mean, I know for you, Denise, that's always a big thing that you talk about is, finding your purpose and really sitting on this balance. That's your Ikigai principles, right? Of sitting on this balanced tabletop of what that looks like. And I had a therapist tell me the same thing, and really being clear on what are your 4 quadrants of, your quadrant of your life. What are your big 4 things, and what are you doing every day to serve those things? And I think that it's that concept of beginning with the end in mind. If you know what you're grounded in, for John, it was 7 principles. If you're grounded in something, if you're grounded in where you want to get to and who you are and what kind of person you want to be, it's really clear if you're on track or you're not on track, right? It's really clear if you lived a day, if you lived a moment, if your action wasn't aligned with that or not. And we all mess up, and there are plenty of times where it's like, well, I didn't really accomplish much today. But if you reframe what that looks like, and you reframe, oh yeah, no, actually I did do this thing that served this greater thing I'm working towards. And there's a real sense of peace in that, right? There's enough. I did enough today, and I'm happy with enough because enough is serving this bigger thing.
Mm-hmm. What I'm hearing you say, Sam, is really teaching us about how this is the business of life, not the busyness of life. And
Yep.
in fact,
That.
yeah, I think back to an episode that we recently had. I was mentioning one of my most favorite movies is The Shawshank Redemption, and it's based off a Stephen King book. And there's a scene in the movie that I referenced in the past episode. Please go listen to it if you haven't listened yet, because it really is a thread that ties this all together. And in this scene, what the actor says that you can get busy living or you can get busy dying, and it's a choice, right? And Pat said in his book that John wasn't like so many people today that have to always be busy or always be talking or always be entertaining or entertained. He was humble, and humility was probably the most striking feature of John Wooden's character. And when you think back to the way he was raised by his dad, Hugh was intentional and proactive in the way that he taught his sons, and that humility was a key in being able to find that peace of mind. Like we said, he lost everything on the farm. He even lost his career to the point where he took a very challenging, difficult job. But all of the people that were still alive when Pat Williams was interviewing some of the people that lived in his community, they didn't remember what necessarily Hugh Wooden did, but they remembered what Hugh Wooden stood for and who he was. And in fact, it reminds me of a quote by Maya Angelou that I often reference that says that people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. And that one of the things that strikes me about Hugh Wooden was that he lived his day every day. John Maxwell has a book called Today Matters, Making Every Moment Count. And so you had mentioned the chapter, Sam, about striving to make today a masterpiece, and we're going to get into that more in detail in a future episode. I think that if I were to close my closing thoughts for today, it was that Coach Wooden said, quote, in the book, "My father used the immediate to prepare us for the future." And that's what effective teachers do. They recognize where you are and prepare you for what is ahead. So if you were to think of any closing thoughts from today, Sam, what might you have taken away from the intro on the book or our time together today?
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, what you just said was that was one of my favorite quotes from the beginning, right? That, oh gosh, I just love that. But I think for me, it's that even as we move through our everyday life, right, just living who we are and being true to the character that we have, right, and living that truth just like Hugh Wooden did, you can affect so many people around you. And those people, you never know what they're going to go on to do, right? And that to me is so exciting that you could, just by living your everyday life, by, being true to who you are, you can foundationally adjust the course for the better for somebody's life. And you can do it quietly. And you can do it where, no one would even know that's what's happening, right? Like Hugh Wooden didn't set out to have sons who were great leaders or great basketball coaches, right? Like John even said, Hugh didn't even care about the outcome of his games. But you can, I don't know, just that ripple effect to me is something really amazing. And you can do it from such quiet places and such amazing spots. And I've seen so many people do that in my life that I know that to be true. And it's, to me, it's just super, I don't know, just really amazing.
I love that. Well, so once again, the book we're talking about is called Coach Wooden by Pat Williams with Jim Denny. There's a foreword in the book from Tony Dungy, and it's the 7 principles that shaped his life and will change yours. So next time, we're going to be talking about principle number 1, be true to yourself. And before we go today, Sam, one of the things that we've been doing on What's on Your Bookshelf is concluding by giving ourselves accountability. So if you were to think about for a moment what you're going to be accountable for between now and the next time, I'd love to hear that. I think for myself, as I think through the intro and to think about what Pat taught in the book, which is that timeless wisdom never goes out of style. no matter how the world keeps changing. For me, I want to be accountable to myself by really not just reading this book, but trying to live out loud the principles that we're finding in it. And if principle number one is about being true to yourself, I think it starts from within first. So I'm going to spend the next week really thinking about in what ways can I be even more authentic and grateful to my own self so that I could show up even better for my family and those that I love the most. How about for you?
Ooh, I think that's great. I think for me, kind of similar lines, but I've been on a journey of self-discovery for the last couple of months, and I have all these notes on, what is my purpose and what are my values, and they're scattered about all over the place. It looks like I'm trying to solve a crime scene with all my Post-it notes. So I think for me, what I'm going to commit to is really getting clear on that, organizing that, getting that maybe I can get that down to one notepad, something that's a little more pulled together, because as we turn around and we get ready to talk about, being true to yourself, I think you got to get clear on who yourself is. And I've been working on it. And this maybe will be that push I need to get it a little more organized.
Awesome. I love that. Well, I have the great fortune of getting to talk to you almost every day. And for our listeners, you can engage with us as well. So in the show notes, Scott, our producer, will make sure that you know how to contact us through our social media channels. We'll include, Sam, your new blog that's out about the Giannis interview. We also would love for you to please, everyone, subscribe, share, and comment on our podcast. You can engage with us directly through our LinkedIn page called School of Thoughts Publishing. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know what's on your bookshelf. But for now, for the next several weeks, Sam is going to be joining me together as we focus on the 7 principles that shaped the life of John Wooden through his father, Hugh Wooden. So on behalf of Sam Powell and myself, Denise Russo, thank you so much for being with us today on What's on Your Bookshelf.